Welcome to the Find Your Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Aleks, a breathwork facilitator, a functional nutrition guide, and the founder of Detox House, which is your portal for nervous system regulation and stress management. Detox House exists to help you stop living in fight or flight. It helps you break stress patterns. It helps you build more capacity, more resilience so that you can find freedom and experience more joy in your life. This podcast will bring you conversations around neuroscience, around stress management, nervous system regulation, brain rewiring, all the things that will help get us out of survival mode and find our freedom. By listening to this podcast, you are unlocking an entirely new level of self. And I am so excited for all of us to experience that new version of you. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Find Your Freedom podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. I am going to be talking about something that is really important on today's episode, really important to me, a journey that I've personally been on, but it can also be really activating. And at the same time, it can also be incredibly liberating, which has been my experience with it. It has been one of the most freeing, liberating concepts that I've integrated into my body, into my life to date, which is why I thought it would be my duty to introduce it here on this podcast today and hopefully give you a sense of freedom and empowerment over a situation or dynamics or relationships in your life. And today, yes, I will be talking about the idea of going from feeling like a victim in your life in general. It is an identity some of us wear, including myself, by the way. So it's not like I'm standing here being like, you're doing this. This is a journey that I've been on. So going from feeling like a victim in your life, specifically a victim to certain relationships, to certain dynamics, and it can be a feeling that goes from the very macro perspective to the very micro perspective. For example, on a macro level, I identify as a woman. There are definitely times that I have felt victimized as a female in certain circumstances, corporate settings, etc. Right? And then you get down and you whittle down to more micro moments where I felt like a victim in my relationship, in my family dynamics, and or I felt like a victim in a specific situation, even with somebody I did not know, like a stranger, but I felt like a victim in that situation. So it goes from macro to the very micro. But before we dive into this entire topic, I really, really, really want to stress and set the stage and set the foundation for this conversation. And this foundation is incredibly important as you continue listening, because this topic can be activating, but I promise you it's also very liberating. The foundation is that this topic is not in any way, shape, or form about blaming yourself for things that have happened to you. It's not about blaming yourself. I just want to make that very clear. This is also not about dismissing real pain, harm, or trauma. In fact, everything that I stand for, everything that I talk about at Detox House is about feeling into what you need to feel and validating your own experience and making sure you know what's real for you. And there's a lot there, right? It's not about dismissing your experience or dismissing your pain. All of that is very real. There are very real situations where people are hurt, where people are unsafe, where people have been taken advantage of, and that is very real, and that matters, and that deserves support. What I want to explore today is taking these dynamics, these situations, and discussing the nuance around the energetics, simply the energetics. And It's about giving you a new framework for thinking about these situations, these relationships, the bad things that have occurred, the things you have witnessed, the things that really make you feel a certain way, make you feel small, make you feel like something is really not fair, make you feel like something should definitely not have happened. There is still a place where your power lives, and most of us were never taught how to access that power. And there's a lot of rhetoric out there that says, like, find your power, don't let other people take away your power. And yes, yeah, sure, but like, what does that mean? How do I do that? That's what I'm trying to talk about today and get us to access today. So instead of viewing ourselves in this smallness, we can find power in the things that have happened to us. And that's from moving from this idea of victim to creator. And again, maybe even just that general concept can be activating to you, but just bear with me in this episode, hear me out. Hopefully it's gentle. Hopefully you feel supported and held, because what we want to do is get out of patterns where we're blaming, where we're constantly blaming somebody else, shaming somebody else, where we feel helpless, or on the other side of that spectrum, where we are over responsible for what happened to us. That's also not where we want to go. Very important nuance. This is not about blaming yourself. This is really about finding a new framework, a new perspective, something that really changed my life. And it began to shift things for me. Instead of, why is this happening to me, or why did this happen to me? What can I create from this? And that's a really important shift. And I want to walk you through that shift in this episode. So hang on and stay with me here. And hopefully you'll find this episode incredibly empowering and liberating. It is an important one. This is something that I am constantly riding the wave of. Generally speaking, I like to be more empowered in the things that occur in my life, but that's not always so easy, especially when bad things happen, hurtful things happen, and it doesn't have to be so extreme and heavy. It could just be like one of your friends said something to you that offended you, or someone just did something to you that rubbed you the wrong way, and you're just like, ugh, I don't like them, or I didn't like that. It's them, right? It's them versus us. And there's this complaining, and then there's this blame game of like how crazy some people are, and how unthoughtful some people are, and how rude some people are. And that's just part of our human experience. It's just a natural part of our human experience. However, more recently, I've been feeling very empowered to change that narrative, even if there are things that are just true. Even if objectively somebody was rude, but learning to reframe it for yourself. And that's like a small example, but on a bigger, larger scale, of something horrible happened to you and it's still owning you in some way. Your life is still feeling that, the brunt of that hurt in some way. Then this episode is for you. This episode is for you if you feel hurt by somebody, if you feel betrayed by somebody, if you feel like there's a person in your life, or maybe multiple people in your life, where you're just like, I can't be around them, they trigger me, they may be abusive and or just not good for you, then this episode is for you. And specifically speaking around how to reframe the roles that we play in these scenarios. Now, God forbid you are currently in an abusive situation, whether that's physically abusive or mentally abusive, emotionally abusive. Please seek the resources that you need to get yourself out of it. But this episode is by no means justifying what you're currently in, and I highly recommend you find yourself out of that situation that's unhealthy for you. And you can still get a lot out of this episode, even if you're in it. This episode can be helpful for everyone. Honestly, all humans, because there's not one human being that has walked away unscathed from some kind of hurt, bad situation, tragedy, whatever it may be. And it's really important that we have this conversation because I want us to find our joy regardless of what happened to us. And I want us to feel empowered in the situations where we may have felt really small and our power may have been taken away. And so that's the goal. So let's begin because, again, this is a really, really important episode, an important topic to cover. And I want to get us out of our role as victim and get us into our role of the creator. And if this episode in any way triggers you, that's a great thing. See what comes up. I recently saw this meme that said triggers are treasures. I was like, yes, honestly, they are. Because every time we are triggered, that shows us where we are not free. And so if you are triggered by this episode, take a look at why this is triggering you, what story you're trying to protect. How does this serve you to be triggered? What are you getting out of it? And I hope this is insightful, and I hope it opens up your mind to think about things differently, because that's where real freedom lies. Real freedom, our ultimate freedom, lies in our capacity to interpret the world in new ways. This is a quote from Martha Beck's book, which I love, and I'm going to be borrowing a lot in this episode from Martha Beck. I'll link to her book here, but a lot of these concepts are concepts that she writes about in this book. And it was just, when I read it, I was like, this is exactly what I've been trying to say. And I just love the way she frames this. The book is called The Way of Integrity, and it's Martha Beck, once again, who's the author. I'll put the link in the show notes. Great resource. So I want to start with a few frameworks to ground us in this conversation that will be really, really helpful for us to consider in moving from the role of victim into the role of creator. Psychiatrist Stephen Cartman has a framework that's very, very helpful. He calls it the drama triangle. And in the drama triangle, as you can imagine, you can see a triangle, and there are 3 roles in this triangle: the role of the victim, the role of the persecutor, and the role of the rescuer. And I want to talk about all 3 of these roles because they really relate to how we show up in the world. I feel like, first of all, no one identifies as a persecutor, and that's fine. Even the persecutor themselves will always, in their perspective, play the role of the victim or rescuer. It's all about how we view the world and we frame things for ourselves. And it's a really, really great framework because it helps us hover over ourselves. At least it's helped me hover over myself, right? Like, take myself out of the situation, see which role am I playing, because I've definitely found myself in both the role of the victim and in the role of the rescuer. And there's different things we get out of each one of these roles. In childhood, I definitely felt a lot of this, especially with the role of the victim. And children typically feel the role of the victim more than anything else. It's pretty impossible to feel any other role in childhood because, you're small. Everyone else seems so big and large and menacing. And then you have your protectors. And theoretically speaking, your parents are supposed to play the role of protector. But a lot of us have had the experience where that was not true. Our parents actually were the persecutors. One parent was a persecutor, one parent was a rescuer. Both were the persecutors. And you seek a rescuer outside of that, whether it's a coach. For me, again, it was my grandmother. And again, this is just a view, right? My parents are really beautiful people. I love them so much. But in childhood, if you're getting yelled at, if there are things that aren't meeting your needs as a child, and I don't want to make this episode about childhood development, but that is an important aspect to this. 0 to 7 years old, we're in that theta brainwave states. There are different things that we need, and if those needs aren't being met, then we do create this role of victim, and it's not very conscious. It's not like a child raises their hands and says, I'm the victim. It's a subconscious role. And oftentimes it's also a role where we blame ourselves, which is not what we want to do when we go from victim to creator. So anyway, this drama triangle, like really wanting to get out of this drama triangle, in order to get out of it, we really have to understand it and understand how these roles are shaped and how these roles are formed. Like I said, when I was a kid, I identified as a victim because my parents would fight and they would yell and they would create this like very tense environment in the home, and my grandmother was my rescuer. And she would come in and say, don't yell at each other or whatever. And again, this isn't to throw anyone under the bus. My parents are great. They're wonderful. They're happily married. But these are circumstances that occurred in childhood, and that was my very real, valid experience. And when you experience these things in childhood, it can often shape how we view the world later on. It shapes our world view. And some people do have a worldview where they are perpetually the victim, constantly. And some people actually have a worldview where they are perpetually the rescuer, which again is very beautiful, a beautiful intention, but they get stuck in that role. And so they always see the need for someone to be rescued, right? And the words here are very important because the word victim has connotations that are, built around it, an energetic of victim, an energetic of rescuer, an energetic of persecutor. People who are stuck in the victim role always, always, always have targets of blame. They are always just seeing persecutors everywhere. This person didn't make my coffee right. This person was rude to me. This person didn't do this. The world that they see and they notice is one of victimhood. And they're always seeking to reinforce that because, as I've mentioned in every single podcast episode, our brain is not here for our happiness. Our brain is here for our survival and to be efficient, and it will notice all the beliefs that we have. So it will reinforce existing beliefs. So if you have a worldview that you are the victim, you will constantly notice persecutors everywhere. You will constantly see persecutors everywhere, and your brain will be so happy about that. Your ego will be so happy about that because it's protecting you. And it's like, great, I see a persecutor. I will do what I need to do to get out of that and complain about that and blame the other person. And it will be so happy because it will reinforce that it is right. We find people, institutions, organizations, and blame them. I am so guilty of this too, by the way. This isn't like an episode where I'm not fully raising my hand and saying like, yes, especially when it comes to the health and wellness industry. I've been so burned by Western medicine that I started viewing myself as a victim of it and not trusting it and really seeing persecutors everywhere in it. And then finding the rescuers on the other side, right? The rescuers, the people who are going to, give us other solutions, other forms of medicine, which again is really great. And this, first of all, this idea of moving from victim to creator doesn't negate what is true and doesn't negate that things are happening, that things in the world can be messed up and are messed up. And there are real people who are, could be causing harm. It doesn't negate it. It gives us a different view of it, so that we can shift the energy around it. And so, even on the rescuer side of things, like being the rescuer, in my own view, like I've had to come to terms with that in the work that I do, and that like we need to shift, and I'll work through the shifts with you, but it's just really important to really get the energy of these roles. The victim, the rescuer, somebody who feels like they constantly need to help others, but not help others in empowering them. They need to rescue them because they see others as small and vulnerable and people who cannot help themselves. And so they play the role of the rescuer. And they see people everywhere who need rescuing, and they get involved. And again, it's not that you shouldn't help people, and I'll get to this in a second. It's the energetic of not empowering the individual you're helping. It's when my friend Jess got really sick, she saw a lot of people wanting to rescue her, but in a disempowering way where they felt sorry for her. They didn't feel like she could do it. They felt like she was so vulnerable, weak, and small. And so the more you play the rescuer role, you think you're doing a good thing for others, but in fact, you're just viewing them as weak and small and somebody that can't help themselves. And again, in the case of children, that is true. We're talking about adults here. Yeah, this is a very nuanced conversation, but I will say 99.9% of the time, this is very true in that we want to empower the individual to also have their own agency, even if we do help them, Obviously, this is why I started this work. I had this rescuer mentality where I was like, I see all these people that are victims of their own circumstances and their own subconscious beliefs and their own survival patterns, and I really need to rescue them and help them. But again, it's not about not helping. It's about shifting the role to the role of a coach versus a rescuer. And let me go through, how we shift out of the drama triangle, because the drama triangle allows us this framework to understand, again, the victim mentality, the victim role that we play in our lives, where we feel very disempowered, where we feel very small. And the idea is not to negate or gaslight or say XYZ isn't happening. Again, terrible things are happening, both on a global level and on a very micro level, maybe within your home, maybe within your relationship. People aren't treating you right. People are rude. Yes, we're not saying that's not true, but we're saying that there is a detriment in not seeing how you are also the creator and can make something of it. So basically what we're trying to do is shift out of this victim, rescuer, persecutor dynamic, this triangle, into a more useful framework, which was created by a guy named David Emerald. So he took Kapman's work of this drama triangle and he moved it into a more empowered dynamic. And so in this dynamic, and this is really, really important, and this is one of the biggest game changers for me, and was the biggest game changers for me in how I viewed my relationship with my family, with my friendships, with romantic relationships, especially those where I was so angry and so hurt by certain individuals. I was really deep in my own victim role of that person hurt me. That person did something messed up to me. That person was not a good person. And I put them in that bucket. And this is not saying that that's not true. That person might be a really unhealthy individual. That might be true. But you don't want them to take your power away. And you don't want to not take any kind of accountability and agency in the dynamic, because it totally disempowers you. And nobody wants to feel that way. I promise you, as humans, we do want to feel empowered. So I hope this shift that David Emerald came up with, that I resonated with deeply, helps. So victims become creators. Instead of saying this situation is really messed up and they're really messed up for doing that. Because you can literally, I can sit there for hours and hours and hours and say, my mom is really messed up for saying this. I can't believe my mom did that. I can't believe my dad did that. I can't believe my friend said that to me. I can't believe she treated me that way. I can't believe they were able to behave this way. That is so messed up. Going from that to this situation is messed up. What happened between us is messed up. But what can I make of this? What can I make of this? And a lot of spiritual practices and manifestation practices will also add a layer of how did I cause this? Which I feel like is a very flawed question, because it immediately disempowers us again. This is not the point. The point of going from victim to creator is not to just shift blame from the other person onto yourself. It's to eradicate blame altogether. Blame is not a great energetic. It's not going to help you. So they do say, how did I cause this? How did my frequency cause this? What was I doing? which again, you can look at that. And I find it really helpful to understand, what was I allowing? What was in my creator field and my frequency that I was allowing this kind of behavior? But you can't do that until you are in a good spot where you're not blaming yourself. Because I don't ask those questions with the energetic of blaming myself. I don't blame myself. I see the perfection in it. I have so much empathy for myself. I have so much unconditional love for myself. I do it in a way where it's so loving and kind to myself versus like, how could I allow for that? How could I date that kind of guy? How could I allow my mother to talk to me that way? That is not what we are talking about here. That is still staying in victim, and then you're just a victim to your own self. You're your own persecutor. So be real with yourself and take responsibility and take ownership for how you are creating a certain scenario, but only when you're ready to see the perfection in it. Only when you're ready to see how perfect it is. Because again, we are not trying to blame ourselves here because it is not your fault. There's no fault. But it is very helpful to see what script you gave the other person. I gave them the script. I'm not sure of my own worth, so please do everything to question it. Here you go. Act in a way where you question my own worth. Act in a way where you totally betray my boundaries because I don't have any boundaries. So you are giving people a script on how to treat you, but if you're not ready to really look at that script, please don't, because you really have to get to a place of unconditional love for yourself. Because the last thing I want you to take away from this episode is that you are blaming yourself for something and there is a fault in it. And I want to talk about the perfection in it in a second, because I think it's really important, because I hear some people saying, oh, that's just spiritual bypassing the perfection in it. Nope. I'll get to that in a second, but I want to move from this drama triangle into this more empowered dynamic, into this framework of victim to creator. And then the rescuers become coaches. And this is really important for all you rescuers out there. Empower the people you're helping. Recognize their own power. Don't view them as weak and small and, oh, you're so helpless. Let me help you. I need to create programs for you because you're helpless. Viewing individuals that way is also not helpful. There's a lot of institutions, organizations that do that, and it's nuanced. It's a very nuanced energetic layer to it, because again, we need rescuers. Trust me, we need quote unquote rescuers. What we need is coaches, and that's the dynamic. What we need is people who are offering support and help for people on their journey who need that help and support. I personally believe we need to empower them at the same time versus viewing them as weak, small individuals that cannot help themselves either. And again, there are small cases, and this is so nuanced, where there are those individuals that are helpless, children, babies, where 1,000% we need to be the rescuer. We need to go in and rescue them. Let's keep this higher level as a general concept of rescuers become coaches and persecutors. And this is the most beautiful shift for me, and also the hardest shift for me. The hardest shift that I think anyone will experience is persecutors become challengers. See how they are your challengers. Again, shift the view. Get yourself out of it, by the way. Do not stay in things that are actively hurting you. Hopefully you have resources to quote unquote rescuers and coaches that will give you the support you need to pull you out of it. Know that you are very empowered. I hope that you see your own power, and you can then view the persecutor as your challenger. I've had this experience. I've had some experiences with this view really coming to light in some deep meditation and deep breathwork practices. I had a very, very deep breathwork sound healing practice when I went to Tulum in Mexico, and I did this 2-hour session, which felt like 30 minutes. And I had this vision. I was really deep in it, and you can hear the sound of the ocean. It was just such a portal, such a magical portal. And I had this vision of my entire family and my lineage standing up on stage in front of me, and they were all taking a bow. And I was like, what is happening? Why are you guys all taking a bow? And they said, we put on quite the performance for you. We're actors in this beautiful movie that you're in, and everything that we've been doing is for you. We're just taking a bow because we deserve an applause. We deserve an applause, especially the villains. Do you know how hard it is to play a villain role? It's not easy to challenge you in the way. It was painful because we love you so much. And that vision of that really blew me wide open. I was like, whoa, okay. My challengers, interesting. What are they challenging me with? How are they here for my own growth? What am I supposed to look at? And again, nuance, do not blame yourself. This is not your fault. See the perfection in it. The blame thing is a really important thing that I think a lot of us struggle with, because I did play around with that, and I did get into a blame game with myself, and that's not where you want to be. But that vision was so beautiful. And I had another experience very similar to that where somebody really hurt me, and I was feeling so victimized by this person. I was feeling so small, tiny, the smallest, so icky, so gross. And I did a breath work, and in the breath work, I'm very emotional. And I asked this person to come forward, their energy to come forward. And I said, why did you do that to me? How could you hurt me like that? And in the breath work, I got this message of like, again, you're welcome. That was really, really hard, but you really needed to wake up and see where you were playing small. You were allowing things that you shouldn't have been allowing. Why were you allowing them? And it really forced me to take a look at the things that I was allowing, where I was abandoning myself, where I was truly abandoning myself. And I was like, ugh, I feel so sad about that. But again, don't blame yourself. It's not a blame game. How can you just have unconditional love for yourself and just say, okay, I realize I was doing that. That's the role I played. And just because we're taking accountability for our role, which we should always do, always look to see what role did we play in this dynamic? How did we show up in this dynamic? Again, not to blame ourselves, but to gain more insight into the type of person we want to be and where some of our gaps are and where some of our holes are, not because we're not perfect. I mean, this is such a balance. And I know a lot of times people have a hard time holding these concepts because their world is so black and white. So bear with me here, as this is a very non-black and white world. But yes, you should take accountability. Yes, you should look to see how you were showing up, what role you played. But please do that with so much love for yourself, compassion for yourself, forgiveness for yourself, seeing the perfection in what is. I really want to talk about that a little bit later, seeing the perfection in things. We'll put a pin in that here. I will talk about that a little bit more. But the compassion for yourself is so important. And just owning your role, owning where your own gaps are, is so important in our growth and in our empowerment. Take your power back. This power shift, this power dynamic shift, is where the persecutor, the person that you are putting in the role of persecutor, now becomes the challenger. They are your greatest teacher. And if that's really hard for you to imagine right now, I understand that. Just leave room for the possibility that you can one day see that. If it is really difficult, just put a pin in it and just know that this perspective is here for you whenever you are ready. It's a really beautiful perspective. I want to take this concept a bit further and just hang with me here, because if you have a different belief system, that's okay. I am in no way, shape, or form trying to alter your belief system. I'm just wanting to put something out there, put a potential question out there that you could answer for yourself. But what if you did choose your parents? A lot of us say, oh, it's my chosen family, my parents I didn't choose. We didn't get to choose our parents. I know, obviously, that's that's a belief system that runs through a lot of religions, and spiritual practices are oftentimes telling us that our souls actually chose our parents. If you read the book Soul Contracts, I'll also link it here if you're interested in that. That is exploring that perspective. It's really, really great. Or the book Spirit Babies. Spirit Babies is a great one. And again, I can hold a few things to be true, right? I grew up very religious. I mean, not very religious, but like I grew up Catholic. I went to Bible camp. I did it all. And I still can hold space for this view, and I actually really deeply, deeply believe in this view. And that doesn't mean you have to, but what if you just entertained the question of what if we did choose our parents? What if we actively sought our parents out? So many of us talk about our childhoods and being the victim of circumstances in our childhood and being the victim of those circumstances, and that's why we have the relationships we have today. But what if we actually chose our parents? Play that question out for a second. Before you incarnated onto this planet, you made some agreement with your mom and your dad, or maybe just your mom, or maybe just your dad, or maybe your adopted parents, whatever situation your soul rolled into here, whatever the scenario, you chose them and you had an agreement. Teach me this. Be this for me. Be my challenger in these ways so I can X. Just entertain that worldview for a second. Because what if that were true? What about the circumstances that you were put into were actually the perfect lesson for your soul? And again, it's really about figuring out how your persecutors are actually your challengers. For me, my challengers have taught me how to really learn how to unconditionally love myself, and also how to trust myself. Part of this nervous system work that I have been through and am now teaching is learning how to be safe in my body and really honing in on that self-trust and not relying on the external world to constantly validate me. If I grew up in a perfect home where my parents just loved everything about me and praised everything and never yelled and did nothing wrong and I could do no wrong, like that sounds great, but it would have never pushed me to these edges to learn this for myself. I would have been way too comfortable. So now I want to go back to what I talked about before about finding the perfection in everything. So a lot of spiritual language will use this ideology of finding the perfection in things. And I do think that a lot of times we can confuse this with spiritual bypass and totally checking out and distracting. And that's not what I'm talking about here. Because in the work that I do, I fully guide myself and others into feeling our feelings, feeling the betrayal, feeling the hurt, feeling the sadness, feeling the grief. So we are not bypassing the feeling. It's part of the process. It's part of the state shift process that I take people through in the 8-week program. We build safety in the body, we feel the feelings, and then we reprogram them with new belief systems. But we feel our feelings. And I think this is one of the most important things I want to call out. When I say find the perfection in it, I do not mean avoid your feelings at all costs, because they will catch up to you. But I will just say that noting how perfect you are, how perfect the scenario is in teaching you a lesson that you needed to learn is really important right now. And I want to point to a body of research to prove my point in all of this. So there is a term called post-traumatic growth, PTG. It was developed by psychologist Richard, and I don't know if I'm saying his name right, Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun. And the basic idea is not that trauma is good or it's perfect, but it's that some people experience really profound positive transformation because of their struggles, because of their adversity. So that matters enormously. I'm not saying here like, oh, your trauma is perfect or your persecutor is perfect or whatever it is. But I do want you to see the perfection in it, because there's some profound positive things that can happen to you as a result of this scenario. So one of the biggest misconceptions is that PTG means that people are happy that the bad thing happened. People are happy with the cancer diagnosis, or people are happy that they were in a quote unquote narcissistic relationship. I say quote because I feel like we're throwing that word around a lot lately and putting people into buckets, and it's limiting us in so many ways, but that's another podcast and another topic. But it's not that people are happy that the bad thing happened. That's not what the research shows. It just means that there is this feeling of, I would never wish this on anyone, but it also changed my life. And it changed me in ways that I really, really value. So it increased my personal strength. It increased my appreciation for life. It deepened my relationships. It gave me more intimacy. It gave me new possibilities. It made me figure out my purpose. It gave me spiritual or philosophical growth. All of these things have been found in adversity, in these experiences. I'm raising my hand here because some of the most horrible things that have ever happened to me, and there's a lot. I have street cred for this, guys. I've been through some things. I've witnessed some horrible things that, again, I would not wish that upon anyone, but they changed me for the better. They led to my spiritual awakening. They led to my growth. And so growth and suffering can coexist. So the research shows that roughly half to 2/3 of trauma survivors report some form of post-traumatic growth. I hope you are part of that cohort. I hope that you are part of that group of people that can see how beautifully this has unfolded for you in some way, shape, or form. You can still have grief, you can still have sadness, and yes, you can still have PTSD symptoms, which is a whole other topic, bucketing that. A lot of the work that we do also addresses that. And you could still have ongoing pain, and you can still experience growth. And that is just the one thing that I want to highlight here. Psychology Today did an overview of PTG, and again, just showed the wisdom, the stronger relationships, the greater compassion, the changed priorities, the deeper spirituality that came out of these things, these situations, these unexpected benefits were found in these moments. And one of the most interesting things was that adversity shattered existing assumptions. And so before the adversity, people had a view of this is how the world works. And then after the adversity, everything they thought was true is being challenged, which you might think is disruptive, but it's actually really great in terms of just reviewing your values and looking at your identity and seeing what you identify with, looking at your priorities, your beliefs. Growth doesn't come from the actual event. It comes from how the person interprets and responds to the event. And so I want to encourage you, if you're dealing with something where you feel victimized and you feel like the victim, I want you to find the perfection in it sooner rather than later, because you're hopefully going to be part of that bucket of people who do. If you're listening to this, you are. So just save yourself the whole process and find the perfection in it now, please, because I promise you there is perfection in it, and there is perfection in how you showed up and the lessons that you learned. And again, at the end of the day, the going from victim to creator is not about blaming yourself. It's about finding the perfection in yourself, but also owning your part, owning how your frequency, your creator field, your actions, your belief systems, your subconscious helped to contribute and give these people a script to treat you that way. What's the script you're giving out to people? Change the script. I just think of Michael Jackson's been really popular lately because of the movie coming out, and I've been listening to a lot of his music, and I just love Man in the Mirror. And the lyrics are just so good. It's if you really want to make a change, if you really feel victimized by something and you want to make a change in this world, just look in the mirror, change yourself, change your frequency, change your belief systems about yourself. And guess what? Part of those belief systems is not blaming others and not blaming yourself. It's about eradicating blame altogether. I know that sounds hard, but that's where we want to go, and that's where we want to be. By the way, disclaimer, once again, I feel like I'm making a lot of disclaimers in this episode because it's so nuanced. That does not mean we stand by and watch certain behaviors that don't align with our values. That does not mean we don't show up for people when they need help. And that does not mean we don't support other people. That does not mean we don't look for support ourselves. This is just a framework for changing your perspective. Again, when you do show up to support people, you empower them instead of make them feel small and weak. When you do show up as somebody that needs the support, you see how empowered you are in that too. You don't see yourself as small and weak and helpless. You see that you are empowered to also contribute to the change, contribute to the support, contribute to getting yourself out of the situation. So again, it's so important for us to play around with these concepts: victim to creator, rescuer to coach, persecutor to challenger, and really see the perfection in everything and ask yourself these questions and frame these things in this way. I promise this framework, if you really sit with it and you really ask yourself these questions and you journal on it and you talk it out, whatever your mode of getting it out of your body is, I promise you, you will gain some major aha moments, some major insights about yourself. And I hope it's beautiful. And I hope you're like, wow, okay. And if this is a hard concept for you to swallow right now, that's okay. It's here for you whenever you are ready. I do hope you see the perfection in some of these scenarios that were awful. I hope you find some perfection in it without negating the fact that it was a horrible experience. It sucked. I wish it upon nobody. And yet it was perfect. I know that sounds so weird, but two things can be true. I hope this episode was enlightening. I hope it gave you some new perspectives, some new ways to think about these things. And I hope you can see the people in your life that maybe you've been complaining about and that you've been blaming as characters in your movie, in your script. I hope you see them taking a bow for you. And I hope that allows you to see things in a new light. All right, I will see you on the next episode. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day whenever you are listening to this. And if you did like this episode, please leave a review, share it with a friend. Anything that gets this content out there will help, and I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you for listening. All right, see you later.